On today's Locked On Jayhawks, can the Jayhawks bounce back in a rivalry game against Kansas State?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Derek Johnson? And I just realized I picked the worst day to wear my Baker Wildcats sweatshirt because, no, we're not going for the Wildcats in this one. It is Kansas State. We're going to be previewing the game. Jayhawks need a bounce back. No KJ Adams. We'll get to the K-State scouting report, matchups of the game, and players to watch. Thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every show. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition, we're going to go over all that stuff. Let's get started right away with our headlines of the game for Kansas State. A little mid-afternoon or early afternoon, I guess you would say, game on your Saturday in Allen Fieldhouse. So Kansas is in need of a bounce back. I mean, heck, Kansas State needs a bounce back in a big way. They're on the floor. Like, they need a bounce up. They need to get back up off the mat. For Kansas, they need a bounce back after the Iowa State win. And it'd feel great if you could have another win like you had against UCF or like the second half against Arizona State or Cincinnati, where you're able to win it kind of comfortably, where you get that bad taste out of your mouth and you feel like you're headed back in the right direction. And, if Kansas gets this thing rolling again, like, we'll be able to point back and be like, oh, they lost at Iowa State, one of the best teams in the country on the road. And yeah, the score looks worse than it was, but it was a 5-point game with like 5 minutes to go or something like that. Like, yeah, of course we can, but you can't do that unless you bounce back. And that starts with winning this game, but also looking good and doing so. If you win this game against what's been a bad Kansas State team, even though it is a rivalry game, if you win this one by 3 points, needing to stop at the end of the game or needing a buzzer beater or needing, just 5 things in the last minute 30 of the game, that's not a good sign either, right? So as much as style points don't matter, they kind of do in this one, just to, I don't know, prove that you're a better team. And it's super interesting because you look at Bart Torvik, since that like January 4th date, Kansas still has the number one defense in the country since then, but the offense is now in like the mid 100s. So you want to see the offense show something in this game and show a sign of life as well. The other big headline in this one is, will KJ Adams play? At time of recording right now, I have no idea. And it's kind of weird because he went out with the injury against Iowa State. Then he comes back from the tunnel from the trainers area and comes back into the game. So it was almost like, oh, he came back into the game, he's going to be fine. So I don't know what the injury is. Typically you'll see that with like ankles, where it's like, okay, the ankle, why, I don't know why I'm trying to be a doctor because I'm the furthest thing from it. But like, point being, you see with ankles where it's like, okay, after time off, it swells up more and then you can't get back on it. I don't know what it would be with like that shoulder area for KJ Adams, but maybe it's something similar. And I think with KJ, obviously, he's somebody who relies on trying to play a physical game. So if he can't bump with somebody with the shoulder, right, that's going to make it even harder for him to get out on the court. But I did find that interesting. And I don't know, like, you're never rooting for a player to get injured. So I want to make that perfectly clear. Like, I hope KJ gets back as soon as possible. Never would like anybody to get injured, all that sort of things. At this point in time, given that it's already happened, could this end up being a situation where Kansas gets an opportunity to give AJ Storr, to give Rylan Griffin, to give some of these guys more minutes to find their rhythm and get into the swing of things and figure out what your best lineups are? Maybe. It's entirely possible. At least that's the hope, right? There's no guarantee it happens, but in trying to view this like as a half glass full thing, like, but again, you hope KJ's okay and everything like that, but maybe it presents that opportunity. So is he going to play? I think it'll be very interesting in this one. Now, you look at the Kansas State scouting report. They come in at just 7-9 on the season. Kansas comes in obviously at 12-4. Jayhawks 3-2 in Big 12 play. Kansas State is 1-4. The Wildcats had a dreadful non-con. That was highlighted by an 11-point loss to LSU, a 19-point loss at Wichita State. And Wichita State, this isn't, Greg Marshall, Fred Van Vliet, Wichita State. But so far in the Big 12, they did beat Cincinnati by 3 in the Big 12 opener. But since then, they lost at TCU by 1. They lost at Oklahoma State by 13. And Oklahoma State's not great. They lost to Houston by 30. And then they lost to Texas Tech by 4, in which they actually kind of hung in there. But Tech ended up coming away with the win. They are barely ranked right now inside the top 100 on KenPom, which Ken Palm currently has this just under a 20-point deficit projected for the game, which I think is very alarming after like the past couple of years where I just like, even when you played the last place team in the Big 12, it was like, oh, maybe it'll be a 12-point spread. Maybe it'll be a 15-point spread. That was certainly interesting to look at, that it was like 18-19 in there. You look at the Kansas State personnel, Doug McDaniel, their transfer from Michigan, who mentioned Bill Self in his transfer video. So that'll be kind of an interesting storyline in this one. But he averages over 9 points per game, over 4 assists, just under 2 steals per game. Has not shot it well. 39% from the floor, 21 from 3. Had much better numbers last year at Michigan, and he's kind of been it's been kind of a I guess abrasive situation with him and head coach Jerome Tang in terms of how that relationship is going, it seems, at least. 6'5" guard CJ Jones, he's shooting 42% from 3. Not a huge score, but shoots it well. The real big shooter to watch out for in this one, Brendan Howson, 6'4" shooting guard for Kansas State, 12.3 points per game, 40% from 3 on very high volume. So you got to check him in this one. Max Jones, 6'4" on the wing. He goes for 9 a game, 37% from 3. So that is kind of a theme here. You've got some interesting 3-point shooters. Then David Gasson is a 6'9", 220-pound forward. He's had a really good year. 12.6 points per game, 7.4 rebounds. He's shooting 64% from 3. He takes a little over 1 3 per game for them. And then Coleman Hawkins is certainly a lightning rod for them. 6'10", 235 pounds. He was kind of the Hunter Dickinson of Illinois. He also played against Hunter Dickinson multiple times, and they kind of went at it a good amount. He can play the 4 or the 5. Versatile big man who can really shoot the 3 ball. 10.6 points per game, 6.9 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 2.2 steals, 1.3 blocks. So he's really filling it up on the stat sheet, but the efficiency hasn't quite been there. 41 from the floor, 33 from 3, just 57 at the foul line. I do think he's pressing a bit. There was that report that he's getting like $2 million from the offseason, and he's had a solid year, but obviously hasn't totally related to winning, and you would expect $2 million to be like All-American level. But he has played well against Hunter Dickinson, and I do think he is pressing a bit because of that. But playing in this environment on the road against a guy you're familiar with Hunter, I think it'll make him play with a more freed mind. Then you have, you'll also see David Castillo a little bit, and a 7-footer in Ugana Onyenso, but those will be more limited minutes for those two guys. Now, what they do well for Kansas State, they don't really send teams to the free throw line at a very high rate. They've had a solid 2-point defense so far this season. They've also had a solid steal rate, and that's been something that Tang teams have done well at Kansas State, that they force turnovers kind of year in and year out. Now, Big 12 only games, they've shot 2s pretty well as well, and they do fire up a large amount of 3s on what's fine efficiency, solid efficiency, above average efficiency. So that'll be something to watch for in this one. What they struggle with, though, in terms of Kansas State, they turn it over too much on that end of the court. Like, they're just losing the ball way too much. They don't shoot many free throws themselves, which, it's not as bad as what Kansas is, but they also don't make their free throws when they get them. Kansas State's also been a bad defensive rebounding team, and they don't really get blocks, so I don't know about the interior defensive presence. If you look at Big 12 only games, Kansas State has also been bad at both ends rebounding the basketball. So this one for Kansas, if you play with hustle, you should be able to win the rebound battle. That said, we haven't always seen Kansas play with hustle or energy, so we'll see how that one goes. And then both sides of the turnover and 3-point battles have not benefited Kansas State through their 5 Big 12 games so far as well. Let's continue on matchups of the game. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or the regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now, it's playoff time, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players, and if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. You can get Lamar Jackson, 250 passing yards, more or less. Travis Kelce, more or less 70 receiving yards. It's fun to predict, easy to play. Plus, with Prize Picks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. And with the app, get your winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. You can also mix and match different sports. You can put something from the KU State game on there with something from the Chiefs game. So ready to run your game this football season, basketball season, or whatever sport you're into with Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, continuing on the show here, and don't forget to check out our bonus episode that we're going to have later today talking about, the lack of fit on this KU basketball roster, lessons it can teach moving forward, stuff like that. I think they should hire a GM, but get into that episode on the bonus episode. You can also check out Locked On College Basketball or Locked On College Football. Get you ready for the national title game coming up on Monday night here. Our matchups of the game for Kansas State. Number one, Bill Self versus the rotations and the lineups. This is an internal one, obviously, but it feels like there's been a lot of criticism over how many minutes player X is playing, how many minutes player Y is playing. Why is this guy not getting more run? Why is this guy getting too much run? Why is this guy playing in clutch time? Why is this guy playing next to this guy, right? There have been a lot of questions going on. It feels later in the season than we're used to have this many questions about the rotation. It's not just one. Like, we've had other years where they went later into the season and be like, okay, who's the center? Who's this guy, right? But to have this many moving parts, I can't remember another one. Last year, it felt similar to this, but they didn't have as much depth or like as many options to do it. So it was almost like, I don't know which of these guys it's going to be, but you have a very limited amount of options. This year, it's like, no, you have a lot of options, but it's like, I don't know which one it's going to be. So this is an opportunity, especially if you do end up winning big, like some are going to project it, to maybe get some different lineups out there. And if KJ Adams can't go, that's an opportunity to get some other lineups out there. If KJ Adams can go, is it an opportunity to play him a little bit less because of the injury that you don't want to play him as many minutes? And then maybe you see what that looks like, right? There's a lot of ways you can go with this, but it's certainly we're getting to a point where you're running out of time to figure out that rotation. And the way I look at it, like, typically Bill Self teams, we talked about this a lot in the offseason, they might, once we get to the thick of things at the end of the year, it might be a 7-man rotation where the 8th man is just playing kind of spot minutes. Well, right now, that hasn't really been the case for KU, right? Because you're seeing, obviously, Ryland Griffin, the starting 5, and then you have Ryland Griffin, who's part of the rotation. Right now, they're giving AJ Storr, minutes as part of the rotation. David Coit is getting minutes as part of the rotation. Floyd Badunga is getting minutes as part of the rotation. And then you're seeing spot minutes for Marquise Passmore. So that's really a 9-man rotation with a 10th guy getting spot minutes. At what point is this going to trim down to an 8-man rotation with a 9th getting spot minutes? Is it going to jump that and just go straight to 7 and 8? And if it is 7 and 8, who are the 2 guys? I think Flory is clearly one of them as your backup big, and also he's awesome. And I think Ryland Griffin would be the other. So would the 8th be AJ Storr? Would it be Diggy Coit? I don't know. That remains to be seen. So I do wonder when that is going to happen exactly. But especially in this game, which is one of your most winnable Big 12 games left. At least it should be. You never know what's going to happen. Rivalry, throw out the record books, all those sort of things. But played at home, maybe this is an opportunity to do that. All right, matchup number 2. Guarding the 3-ball and guarding stretch bigs. Coleman Hawkins for them, who plays the 4 and the 5. He takes 3.8 3-point attempts per game. That ranks in the 90th percentile for his position. So he's getting them up about as much as any big in the country. David Gasson is 6 of 18 from 3. So, he's been fine at it, not taking a ton of them, but he can, at least here and there. So, you do have to worry about that a little bit with the 2 bigs. Then you have Housen, who is shooting 40% from 3. He is taking almost 8 3-pointers a game, 7.8 per game to be exact. That ranks 98th percentile nationally for his position. So he is getting them up basically as much as anybody in the country. Now, they haven't been a great 3-point shooting team, but they're solid at it, right? They're not shooting 40%, but again, they're solid at it. They're above average, and they're doing it on high volume, and they can get it from a lot of different positions. You can get it from a couple of those bench guards. You can get it from Housen. You can get it from a couple stretch bigs. So you're getting it from different areas, from unique places. They take a super high rate of 3-point shots from the corner. So I think those figure to kind of test KU in this one, because I do look at it and I'm like, okay, sometimes you can take away some of those above the break threes with your hard hedges. It's a little bit harder to do that in the corner. So I'll be interested to see how KU defends them and can guard them. And that's kind of the avenue I look at, where it's like, if Kansas State is going to be in this game, or, is going to scare you to the end, or even pull the upset, it's going to be because of the three ball. Number 3, don't turn the ball over getting the ball inside. You had a lot of turnovers against Iowa State, way too many, and you need to hone that in. So that's, part of this. Kansas State has actually allowed one of the largest volumes of shots at the rim defensively. They're in the top 7% in the most shots they've allowed at the rim in college basketball. And that number's going up in Big 12 play. Like during league games, they're in the 3rd percentile. So basically 97% of college basketball is doing a better job at preventing shots at the rim than Kansas State. That's not a good thing for the Wildcats. So you should be able to get shots at the rim. And that is an opportunity for KU to feast in an area that they typically do damage, and an area where KU would like to kind of live game in and game out. But the big thing here is, you look at it, and one of the easiest ways to turn the ball over, or one of the most common ways you turn the ball over, is trying to get the ball inside, right? It's tighter windows. You have to be more accurate with your passes, and whether it's throwing into the post or throwing into a crowd, trying to, fit one into somebody, especially if they're sagging their defense in the middle, if KJ's playing, right? It gets a little tighter in terms of the windows you have to throw to. So just don't turn the ball over in getting those passes to the inside. And if you can do that, then you should be able to get a good amount of shots up at the rim and have a comfortable and high percentage area where you can consistently go to, and you want to typically go to as a team. Let's get to our players to watch. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on the favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. You can build a same-game parlay. You can parlay together NFL stuff with college basketball. You can get Kansas in this one, giving a ton of points. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, we have a bonus episode coming out today, too, talking about KU basketball and the lack of fit. And there was an interesting quote from Bill Self after the Iowa State game talking about their fitting roster. So we'll get into that on a bonus episode. But thank you for joining us today. We'll have a recap up for the Kansas State game after the game later into the night on your weekend as well. All right, player matchups for Kansas and Kansas State. Let's go with Coleman Hawkins versus Hunter Dickinson, because I know this might technically be David Gasson might be guarding Hunter Dickinson, and I think part of it too will be dependent on this KJ Adams play or not, right? Like at that point, maybe they'll just be like, we're gonna put both guys in the paint, and then we're gonna double Hunter Dickinson. I don't know. But I still think it's very interesting because you have two guys who, both from former Big Ten schools, both have been, good players at their previous stops. Both are having good seasons this year, right? But maybe not quite living all the way up to the expectations. Both are probably very high paid in NIL. Both of them are guys who I think are very polarizing. I guess I would say, like, Hawkins is very spoken out on social media, which for some people has rubbed them the wrong ways at different points. For Hunter Dickinson, there's been some antics on the court. There's been, certain things that he said or done that has also done the same thing. Other people aren't bothered by either, and other people, like it, the characters that they're bringing to the game, right? Either way, they're polarizing, and they're going at it, and they've been at it before, and they just played when Hunter Dickinson was at Kansas in that exhibition game last year that they played at Illinois. And Hawkins hit a bunch of threes. I think he made 4 threes in the game. He ended up with like 14 points and I think 5 rebounds. Obviously, Illinois won the game. Terrence Shannon was really good. Kevin McCullough was healthy, and he was good for Kansas in that one. But I think that matchup is interesting because it goes beyond just the actual on the court. And it's 2 important players, one for each team, but it also goes into the kind of the storylines or I don't know, of both players' histories and how they've kind of gotten here. High on the go-off meter, we're going to go with Zeke Mayo. Zeke Mayo has been nails at home so far this season. He is shooting a much higher percentage in the home games so far this season. We brought this up before the Iowa State game. And, he had a good game against Iowa State in general. He ended up just 7 of 19, which, maybe forcing some shots at the end and stuff like that. But overall this season, Zeke Mayo at home is shooting 41% from three-point range in Allen Fieldhouse. He's also shooting 92% at the free throw line in Allen Fieldhouse, 51% from the floor. And in home games, he is averaging 17.1 points, 4.8 rebounds, 3 assists per game. So Zeke Mayo has been awesome at home. On top of all of that, I don't know, it probably means a little bit more to him than some other players. For everybody, this is a rivalry matchup because you're on the team, but it probably means more and feels like more for Zeke Mayo, who's grown up with it, who grows up with, maybe friends who are K-State fans in the Lawrence area or something like that, right? This one feels a bit more personal, so I think he's going to care, and I think that's a good thing. And then on top of it all, I think you can score on the K-State guards a little bit. I don't view them as an elite crop of the defenders with their backcourt, so I think a lot of things lining up for Zeke to have a big game for KU. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget to check out that bonus episode. Again, we will be back on the weekend. Obviously, the Chiefs playoff game. I got some broadcast stuff on Saturday. So the recap for the KU K-State game will probably come out Saturday night, maybe Sunday morning. But stick around for that. We will have it at some point over the weekend. And find it anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. See you then with Locked On Jayhawks.